This podcast may contain language not appropriate for children.
That includes you, Norman. Absentee parents are not exempted from this.
Oh no! When did he use, adult language, though?
Listen, he doesn't practice what he preaches. I mean, I think we'll find he is very much a hypocrite in the recording of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, Tate and Lisa spent enough time around him. They learnt some potty mouth. It wasn't good.
You know how, Norman's gym in the games has, an attack room, a defense room, an accuracy room. Suddenly there's just a cunt room. I don't know.
The serving cunt room.
No, if anyone serves cunt, it's Wallace. Please.
Yes. 100%.
Welcome to you all to Podcastmon Adventures. We are a retrospective podcast aiming to discuss the Pokémon Adventures manga, also known as Pokémon Special, arc by arc. I'm Wensleydale Cheddar, they, them, and who do I have here with me?
Hoven with an H, he, him.
And Henry Kathman, he, him.
Excellent, excellent. So, last we left off, we discussed the mother of all arcs on our book club, when it turned out an old man whose name we retconned kidnapped 5-year-olds to research time travel for him. What are we chatting about today, Henry? Surely nothing time travel related this time.
You know, that's the thing with Pokemon. You never know what you're gonna get. It's like a box of chocolates. Sometimes you get a little enemies to lovers arc. Sometimes you get a Tarzan ripoff. Sometimes you get some parental issues that people are working through. And, sometimes you get different breeds of eco-fascism fighting against one another. So I'm sure this will be a very uneventful arc. Ruby and Sapphire, it was once again published by Viz Media in the States. These are the chapters going from Pokemon Special Chapter 181 through chapters 267. So, yep, not skimping on those arc sizes. It was beginning serialization in December of 2002 and ended in August of 2006. Authored by Hidenori Kusaka, as well as continuing our illustrations by Satoshi Yamamoto.
Yeah, Kusaka worked hand in hand with Satoshi Yamamoto.
You could say they used helping hands.
Oof. Oof indeed. In terms of this arc, once again we're getting into some of the longer arcs compared to the Gold and Silver arc, which ended up running for 90. This one is only slightly shorter at the 87 mark, which it's impressive that they were able to contain all of this stuff within those volumes. Then again, we do have the Emerald arcs occurring.
It's a good thing that Fire Red and Leaf Green was just right between those, but because otherwise, I imagine...
It would be a bit of overload.
Yeah, it would. So, who's been translating this?
This is translated by Tetsushiro Miyake, with the English adaptation by Brian Turgage, lettering by our good friend Ace, original series design by Yukiko Whitley and Sean Carrico, original series editor Annette Romain, collector's edition production art by Christine Medelem, collector's edition design by Julian Robinson, and the collector's edition editor Joel Enos.
Hang on, was Whitley named Whitley because the original series designer was Yukiko Whitley?
I think so.
Is this a self-insert? I would love this.
The Whitley fans are rioting.
Listen, people are allowed one self-insert, I think, as a treat.
Yeah. I love that when people who create the show also voice things and so on. I've noticed that in English adaptation is a new credit here.
I'm gonna let y'all know right now, Gen 3 is a weird generation for me. I don't have as much experience or nostalgia compared to some of the other generations, which is strange considering most people in my age group consider this the best generation, and Ruby and Sapphire. I don't know. I think the thing for me was that when I was playing Ruby and Sapphire, I was still trying to figure out how the games work, and because of that, I found myself messing up a lot more, and I could never beat the Elite Four in that game.
I don't know. I was in exactly the same boat, but it's still super nostalgic for me. Maybe it was just because it was the first one I played, and also it was the added factor. I came back to it when I was like, I don't know, 11, and had a bit more of an idea of how to play it, and I did get to experience the whole thing at still a pretty formative time, so...
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't really spend much on games as a kid. My mum especially raised me with the mentality, if I'm buying something, some entertainment, I have to, like, make use of it, and if I want to occupy myself, I might as well, like, do it over and over with this one thing.
Oh, wow.
Pokemon Emerald was one of the 2 games I had on my Game Boy. I ended up replaying it over and over. The other one was Leaf Green, but that was in Italian, so I didn't like to play it as much. Nothing against Italy.
Oh,
Nothing
boy.
against Italy. It's just I didn't know the language. I only knew some words.
Yeah, I can imagine that would mitigate some of your enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
In terms of games, to have that be, like, your one game, I think Emerald is, like, a pretty good candidate for that, considering how, like, so many people hold it up as, like, this very generous, I would want to say, amount. I'm loath to use the word content, but the amount of stuff that you're able to do in, like, this game. This is an interesting point in time in the Pokemon franchise.
It is really Emerald and Platinum that are the 2 mergers that are just the most chock-full. And I think people have generally more fond feelings for Hoenn as a region than Sinnoh. Although, obviously, Sinnoh has lots of fans.
You guys have to be prepared for me to become the most obnoxious Gen 4 fanboy once we get to that arc. Sinnoh supremacy.
That's alright. I can simp for Gen 4. But, while we're here...
Yeah, all right, youngster Hoenn. Now it's your task to provide us with the summary.
Ingredients of a great trainer combo. Ruby, a young boy obsessed with beauty and Pokemon contests. Sapphire, a young girl equally obsessed with being strong, wild, and beating all the gym leaders. Good first impressions. A wacky run-in at Sapphire's secret base where they don't mix at all. Meaningful communication. Ruh-roh! Ruby upset Sapphire by abandoning the mission to save Hoenn and ditching all of them for Johto. Sensitivity! Ruby lashes out at Fifi the Feebas and made it run away into the sea. Pokemon compatibility. Will you control the earth-shaking legendaries, or will they control you? Supportive friends. Only through cooperation, teamwork, and double battle finesse can the day be saved. A new rom-com arc for the ages by Hidenori Kusaka, When Ruby Met Sapphi.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Kusaka, you do really love that When Harry Met Sally dynamic, don't you?
The funniest thing is, I wrote all of this out, and then I went into the other room, and guess what movie my mum and sister decided to stick on? so there you go.
I'll have what she's having.
Brilliant. I think I like the dynamic more than Gold and Crystal. They seem to, like, complement each other's personalities rather than, like, one overriding the other. It's a bit more of an equal dynamic in this.
I will say they do get some actual time together in this volume compared to Gold and Crystal.
Yeah, Ruby and Sapphire, it's a much more flawed arc than Silver, Gold, and Crystal. From an objective standpoint, I can definitely acknowledge that the last one was better. I still had a really damn good time with it. Going forward, it might be the one I have the biggest soft spot for, just because it really tapped into my nostalgia very effectively. But that is a personal thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So, I'm just going to say it. This is probably my favourite arc and my favourite region. I enjoyed reading this a lot. I love the set pieces, the characters, how they bounce off each other. I love the drama that unfolds. Oh god, do I love the drama. And it's because of how much I enjoyed that I'm going to be extra critical of this arc, because I did really want it to be handled well. Well, I want to focus on what wasn't. I also know that Hoenn is the Hoenn Sim Supreme, so he's going to heap all the praise for me anyway.
We'll get into more of that in a bit, but I do find that something that makes this arc a bit interesting compared to the previous arcs is that now that they've been doing this manga for, like, at this point, it would have been close to 10 years. No, getting up there. As a result, you can get a sense that they are trying to add an element of maturity to the story. That's something that a lot of people tend to kind of talk about with the Ruby and Sapphire games being like, oh, this is when they were getting more mature and grown up like their fans, which I don't know how much credence I would give to that. Even if they fumble in a couple of key places, which I'm sure you guys will get into, it is interesting to see them go for these elements of ambiguity and try to add a little extra dimension to these characters. I don't want to pull too many comparisons between the Ruby Sapphire manga to the anime, but I do find Sapphire a far more compelling character than her anime counterpart.
I was gonna say in my intro, if I'd read this manga as a kid, I would have totally been one of those obnoxious fans that you can't stand who are like, this is what the anime should be doing. That would have been me to a T.
Yeah.
Like, Sapphire's place in the story is especially welcome for her initial introduction. Like,
Yeah.
she completely, like, subverted your expectations at the start, right?
Yeah.
Hoping you predicted that, yeah, it was going to be stereotypical. The boy was going to do the gym battles, and you predicted, like a lot of that. So bravo.
Yeah, I feel like I nailed a lot of it. Although, yeah, the other thing was, like, the secret base escape was done by the villains running from the heroes. I guess the first chapter was kind of the opposite. And then Kyogre versus Groundon wasn't actually very far removed from the game story.
Yeah.
This arc is a really interesting dichotomy for me. Hoenn has a very special place in my heart. Emerald was my first game, and it made me fall in love with the Pokemon world as a kid. And in almost every way, this Ruby and Sapphire arc is the adaptation of the game I'd have envisioned in my head at that age. The grand scale of the region, the vast cast of characters, each given their own bit parts to play, and just the sheer scale of the climaxes, with Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza just feeling like these unparalleled forces of nature.
Yeah.
You know, they're shaking up the very fabric of the region with their battle.
We are in Climax City still.
No, Henry.
Just all the climaxes.
Henry, don't say Climax City, please.
Oh, the Climax City with all these hot Pokemon professors. Then you have the way the two villain teams play off each other, sometimes undercutting each other, and then getting the upper hand and joining forces when necessary. You have this involved arc for the male lead coming into his own as a hero, and an outright romantic confession mutually between him and the female Dex Holder. No bottling things up at the last minute, no leaving the feelings to stew for later. They just straight up tell each other.
No, why don't you go live together? Jokes.
Yeah. For a generation where a lot of the fans from the prior ones aged out and put the franchise down or set it to one side, and, at the time it was often considered a bit of a black sheep, it's really heartening to see the region get such a thorough and thrilling treatment. I genuinely feel like Hoenn really struck a chord with the mangaka just as much as it did with me.
I can agree with that.
But on the other hand...
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, yes. Remember when I predicted that this gen was where the boy and Dex Holders would finally get pretty much equal importance to the plot, instead of the boy trainer just about edging out as the de facto protagonist? For a hot minute there, it really seemed like that was what they were going for.
Yeah.
For a lot of the arc it is. But then we get to the last third, and Sapphire felt a bit shafted. It's not like she had nothing to do, but with the myriad, quite possibly highest number of climactic standoffs we have, it does feel like Ruby just completely steals her limelight, with her largely relegated to support and love interest, while he gets all the big, significant hero moments. Again, this adaptation is much like how I had envisioned this game on a bigger canvas as a small boy, and that's not without its caveats.
I can agree with that.
The main theme of this arc, I would say, is isolation versus community. So both Ruby and Sapphire start from a very isolated place in their lives. Ruby is estranged from his family and cares about nothing except getting back to Johto. Sapphire is very much in touch with nature, but her contact with other humans is extremely limited, as demonstrated in Rustboro. Unknowingly, they help each other become more in touch with their community, leading Sapphire to become more interested in mutual aid, while Ruby just kind of digs in his heels. But eventually it's only due to him befriending Mr. Briny earlier that he finds the solution for how to reach the underwater orbs and save the region. It's a very powerful scene when he sees the effect the environmental disaster had on Slateport, on the ordinary people living there without his fighting ability, like Captain Stern, like Doc, the Poke fan club president.
Oh god, the Pokemon.
Yeah, and that one blind kid as well, who hasn't been named, I have to stress.
Yeah.
Steven needs to gather a team who can awaken the Reggies, and he finds it in the Hoenn Elite Four and a chance meeting with Sapphire. Near the end of the arc, the theme sort of changes from mutual aid to sacrifice, as seen with Ruby, Norman, Steven, and sort of Fifi, which, by the way, I do love that this arc doesn't shy away from portraying Ruby's cruelty towards Feebas. It really does earn the deconstruction later on in the story. I just want to say for the record, Fifi's comeback to Ruby did make me cry like a baby.
Yeah.
And then there's the big argument between the two in Fortree, which is executed excellently, juxtaposing Ruby's trauma-induced indifference and foreignness with Sapphire's protectiveness over the land. It really scratches that drama itch that I have. Then there's like Winona and Wallace mirroring that. I'm not a fan of the fact that once he does decide to start fighting, he just does all the action, leaving Sapphire to play second fiddle. Which brings us to the second thesis of this arc. Gender essentialism is the natural state of being, and gender nonconformity is induced by trauma. Yay!
I thought this was one of the bets of what your rant was going to be. The other two were what we just touched on, and the eco-fascism, which I had that as the least likely because it's a lot more vague and abstracted in this arc than in, say, the Yellow arc.
In the childhood, Ruby and Sapphire were tough and delicate respectively, like they were supposed to, but when Ruby protected Sapphire from a wild elements, he suffered a horrible wound, and she got scared, so he swore off Pokemon battling and became devoted to beauty, while Sapphire felt guilty about how helpless she was, so she forsook her femininity. The story signals that these are character flaws that they need to overcome. Especially since Ruby's arc is all about his need to reawaken the hidden fighter inside him. And what better way to reinforce that than to lock the female lead out of half the climax, literally lock her up in a car? I have to stress. I mean, it's a very cool car, mind you. Wallace has a flying car. I feel like this has to be mentioned, but he locks her up in a car.
The strangest thing about that whole sequence to me is the fact that they've been, riling each other up the whole time, even as they've been becoming more amicable. They've always found ways to piss it off. How did Sapphire not have a strop at him about that? The one legitimately shit thing he did in the latter part.
Yeah.
She doesn't seem to mind.
Maybe she was too busy staring at his manly back.
Oh boy. Shonen manga gonna shonen manga.
What doesn't help is that even when Sapphire has some screen time in the climax, it sort of feels like an afterthought. Like this scene where Steven meets Sapphire finally after she receives the letter from his father, where she chases around the region to deliver it, and she finally manages to meet him, and it's very cool, but it doesn't make sense at all from a story structure standpoint. So Sapphire was blown away by an explosion together with Ruby. Oh no! But Steven catches her. It's fine. But no, she's blown away again after that. And she wakes up next to Ruby.
I love the idea that they were having the conversation really, 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 really quickly.
It's like the scene was meant to be somewhere else, but just ended up here. Imagine we had Sapphire join Steven later and help him with the Reggies.
See, at the time, I was kind of like, okay, that's a really dramatic betrayal. I'm kind of in with that. I wonder what the ramifications are going to be, and then there weren't really any.
Oh yeah, the moment itself is cool. Kusaka not having Sapphire do anything else. is not.
Yeah.
Imagine she still wants to influence the battlefield, and she finally finds a way to do it that is independent from Ruby. But no, we can't have that. We have to have her locked in a fucking car!
It's fine. The AC's on, the windows are cranked down, she's got her favorite song on. You mentioned earlier that there was these themes of community versus isolationism, and something interesting about like Team Aqua and Team Magma as organizations. We're still in the territory where like some of their environmental allegories and lessons is a little bit muddy, but because it's not 100% spelled out who is like the good guy amongst those groups, and the fact that there's like debate within like the gym leaders and like the different inhabitants of Hoenn of like who would they want to side with, I feel like that adds a nice amount of complexity to it.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how the two sides would manipulate different aspects. So Team Aqua would be controlling the broadcast media, and then, you know, in certain situations, one of the teams would seem really friendly and, like, philanthropic to a particular side character and present themselves that way to get what they want.
Yes, it's an interesting framework. I love how certain gym leaders respond to them. I love how Brawly's like, no, Team Aqua's good. If they raise the water levels, we'll be able to surf everywhere. Then he like realizes, oh, my people are going to lose the homes. Fucking oops.
Brilliant, Brawly. I'm glad that we got some Supreme Himbo energy amongst the gym leaders here. It's wow.
You have kind of obviously like that overarching franchise issue of the villains being status quo structures is very much still there, as it was in the games that this is adapting, but like it felt a lot less, there was much less attempt to justify it, which I'm pretty okay with. Just letting them be fun Saturday morning cartoon villains is much preferable to me than a half-baked justification like with Lance.
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head here. You were expecting me to like have a problem with how they're framed, but to me, these teams really succeeded as a story element where Elite Four and Neo Team Rocket failed. I like that their goals were kept vague and ideological, more land and more sea, since it's like not as easy to poke holes in. This arc didn't need to have a pseudo mastermind like Price or Agatha, whose like master plan always wound up making no sense. But they were just some charismatic guys with an imperfect plan who could fail, and were framed as such. And like this made their involvement in the story much more dynamic to me.
It's really funny how the game versions of these characters have this whole arc of like, we've learnt the error of our ways, we shouldn't have done this. And with these two, it's like, yo, this is rat, you know what? You know how fun it is being evil? We should do it together. Let's fuck everyone else. Let's just do what we want.
It's one of those things where like jocks and nerds finally coalesce and they decide, hey, instead of fighting against each other, let us join forces and make everyone's lives worse. And also maybe smooch a little.
Can we talk about how them being jocks and nerds kind of like got reversed to what it was in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Here, Archie is like the mastermind.
He's always distinguished in his suit.
Yeah, with his little glasses.
Yeah. He kind of looks like Kyle's dad in South Park in his day job suit as the TV executive.
Oh my god.
In the volume extras, Maxie is described as the Bandit King. They improvise and he lets them do the thing, while everything in Team Aqua has to be ice cold and pre-planned.
I have not read the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire arcs, but I'm going to be very interested in seeing how they reverse course on that one.
I mean, it's going to be interested seeing what they do with Shelly, because, like...
Yeah, the different ethnicity.
So, are they going to just have a new character there? How are they going to handle that? That'll be interesting.
Kind of the same like with most of Team Aqua. Tabitha is a fucking shapeshifter, but because like his appearance from the game is very different than in the manga, then his appearance in the manga is very different to what it is in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They kind of swapped body types with Matt.
I think it's one of those cases where as the franchise continues on, I think by the time they got to remaking Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they were probably at this point like, okay, we don't have 32 bits to work with. We can add a little bit more detail to the characters and their designs, and as a result, this is where we start to see a lot of those creative liberties being taken with that.
I mean, I love the redesigns for all of the admins. They look dope, especially Courtney.
Oh, yeah.
I still like most of Team Magma in their old designs. Team Aqua too.
What? You're telling me you're not a fan of Pirate Anchor post-apocalyptic Immortan Joe looking Maxi?
Archie.
I don't know, the spandex just don't work for me all that well. As much as I respect the choice to add some melanin into Team Aqua, I find both teams to be just too over-designed and futuristic. I like the wider, chunkier trousers. I like Team Aqua looking like proper pirates rather than scuba divers. I like Magma looking like proper cultists rather than cosplayers. God, Courtney used to be so cool here. In Auras, she just looks like another Moe waifu.
I will say, I think the themes that stuck out to me were like synergy and unity, and they made that very prevalent with how they brought in double battles as a major thing, which started with this gen. It was a very clever way to work the new mechanic into the themes of the arc, and it feels quite fitting, given that there are dual teams going up against each other. It's like, you know, Sapphire and Ruby learning to cooperate and appreciate each other, while Archie and Maxi fight independent of each other, and then even when they do properly team up at the end, Archie and Maxi that is, it's at the expense and dismissal of all of their former underlings. Ruby espouses the value of compassion in reuniting with Phoebas and reflecting on his dad's sacrifice.
It's interesting that you bring up translating game mechanics into this, because one of the other things that causes Ruby and Sapphire to be held in such high esteem with Pokemon fans is the fact that they do add this like wide breadth of mechanics within the game. We're now operating on that nice little translucent blue machine with the Game Boy Advance, so with the double battles and also Pokeblocks and also the secret bases, and now you can do the running shoes. The fact that they even codify the running shoes as a thing in this manga with like...
It's like Detective Conan.
Yeah.
With his little sneakers that you can like kick things really far with like a whoosh.
It's one of those interesting things, because honestly, playing through Ruby and Sapphire again, it is weird that there are certain features that they add in during Gen 3 that do kind of get dropped. Like, who here has fond nostalgia for the PokeNav? I find the fact that, like, they fixated on the PokeNav as, like, such a thing, even though it's just the map feature again.
I like the trainer's eyes feature that had like all the characters that you can have a rematch with, like a little profile.
I think that's in Emerald, because that's what I remember the Pokénav being like.
I guess when it comes to the callers, the trainers were a little less memorable than in the Gold and Silver, so...
Yeah, you don't have Butt Catcher Wade. Or Chad the Chad. Watch Stamina's Log.
Oh, man.
Patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar.
Yeah, it's all out, like 120 episodes. I'm still releasing them on Patreon, but because Patreon likes there to be like a given amount of posts every month. If you're a backer and you DM me, I'll just provide you the playlist.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ruby and Sapphire as a game adaptation, this arc takes a lot more time to introduce all of its locations than Red, Green and Blue, or Gold, Silver and Crystal. You can tell that the first part of this was still being written when Emerald wasn't out. For example, we have Team Magma invading Slateport instead of the Aquas, then Team Aqua are the ones operating in Mount Chimney. It's kind of reverse in the appearances in Emerald.
Yeah. I found it interesting how the Emerald stuff got filtered in the latter half. Because, if you look at the serialization dates compared to the game releases, it's very clear that this particular arc is where the manga starts to fall behind its source material, which we should still feel the shockwaves of now.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I'm gonna abstain from mentioning specific Emerald features, because, Hoven, you're gonna be in for a treat once we get to that little segment of things. Not to go into too much detail.
Okay.
Because they do add in some of those different features that we do see prominently within, the Emerald games. Although, I do think they kind of realize, oh man, we don't know when Gen 4's coming out, so we're gonna need to, stretch this guy out until we can get to Gen 4's. I feel like that ends up becoming somewhat emblematic, especially near the end of this arc, in my opinion. Like, we're still in, I'm not going to say Climax City, the Climax Zone.
Oh my god, that's even worse! That's even worse!
Yeah, that's definitely
The
better.
bones. The Cubone Zone.
Because when we see the fact that, like, the beginning of the end of Groudon, like, the fact that it's 14 chapters of the beginning of the end with Kyogre and Groudon.
And Joe Pesci.
And the fact that a single, like, volume is just a battle between Flannery and Shelley and Brawly and Blaze. Like, and it's not even that the battle ends, it's just... Like, you could summarize one of the first of those volumes as they just continue the battle. A lot of continuing battles and fewer, like, conclusions to said battles. Now, a lot of that is to leave us in suspense with, like, different cliffhangers and stuff. But, I don't know, it's one of those things where my critiques of this arc kind of matches some of the critiques of the Ruby and Sapphire games, where... It starts off on a very linear track where you kind of have a decent idea where to go, like, but once you start hitting that point where you're using Surf and you're just, like, got all that water, some might say too much water, 7.8 out of 10, it feels a little bit like there's less of a direction to head into, which I feel like is mitigated by the fact that Ruby and Sapphire are pretty compelling characters, essentialism aside.
The very nature of this adaptation is that they kind of beeline past a lot of the routes. So...
That's true.
There's kind of the bare minimum amount of water travel in this part, really.
I might be in the minority, but I like the sandboxy nature of the latter part of Ruby and Sapphire. It has, like, a lot of stuff to visit, and it feels rewarding when you do explore.
Yeah.
And you do, like, find even random trainers to battle. I find it quite fun.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm just have mine slightly clouded by the fact that I was as young as I was when I was playing that, so younger Henry found elements of that a bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't know, I just remember the moment where I found, like, Moss Deep City after months of just not really knowing where to go. I was like, oh my god, it's here! I found King John's treasure, or whatever. King John? Who's King John? Why does he have treasure? Where was I going with that? Anyway.
Well, is it the fucking Magna Carta?
Yeah,
Captain John would probably be more fitting.
Yeah.
That's probably what I meant.
Sapphire's Tropius roaming the skies freely and being summoned for airborne trips unintentionally predicts the Eon Flute in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
Yes, I thought about that.
Yeah, no, I like that as an extension of how, like, she puts so much of a focus on, like, being synergistic with nature and stuff like that. I do like that she tries to have more of a cooperative kind of vibe with her Pokemon, which I think complements well, like, Ruby's arc of, like, trying to be a better trainer especially with things like Fifi and stuff like that.
She definitely seems to come, like, from the Gold school of, like, oh yeah, my Pokemon are my partners.
Another way that they adapted new things from the game was the introduction of overworld effects with cast form.
Oh yeah!
Which becomes very important for Groudon and Kyogre later.
Do you want to talk about the art highlights a little bit? I have just a few notes.
Yes, I've got a few.
First of all, if there's anything that this arc does well, it's scale. Like, the 2-page spreads of Groudon and Kyogre are, like, gorgeous to look at.
Yes.
They're always, like, massive forces of nature.
They really hit the nail on the head with the money shots.
Mm-hmm.
The lettering and touch-up on Groudon's entry is amazing.
Yeah. Not as impressive as those spreads, but I love just how, like, they always draw Norman with just, like, the most dirty scowl. Like,
yes.
When he says, the person who said Rayquaza free, was it me? Yes. Like, his eyes are just squinted so small when that was...
Also, just the shot of Norman stood behind Ruby atop the weather center in the rain is a really good one. Shot at panel. Sorry, Maxie. Not the Pokemon character, the podcaster.
Shout out to Maxie Bernard. Yeah, listen to the podcast Friendship Effect Victory. It's very good.
I found some of the facial expressions on Ruby and some of the early scenes looked a little off to me in some of the more dramatic bits, but it mostly evened out.
Yeah, well, if we're talking art, what are we thinking of, like, Sapphire's, like, jungle outfit?
It was a choice.
It's one of those things where I'm not sure if they're trying to go for, like, it's one of those things where they're trying to show off, like, oh, she's, like, one with paint with the colors of the winds and all that. Which gets into some, like, kind of weird, like, label this as, like, the usage of, like, noble savage imagery and stuff like that. But I wasn't too wild on, like, the grass leaf clothing, but I do find it very funny how even when she's, like, in her regular outfits, she does still have fangs.
Yeah, the fangs are a nice touch.
I think out of the leaf outfits, I like the 4-tree one better than the initial one.
Yes.
The leaf bikini, it looks very weird, whereas like wearing it as like a tube top, it just looks much cooler.
Yeah.
Leaf bikini is a bit...
I like the fact that after she lets loose with Ruby's betrayal, her crouching in combat becomes like the way that she poses.
Yeah.
Very sort of animal-like.
I really liked one thing about, like, Sapphire and Flannery's battle with Matt from Team Aqua. The evil fucking Azumarill, the most evil motherfucker on the planet.
It is always delightful when they make one of the Pokemon look like little bastards.
I also forgot where it was, but there is also, like, a panel of amber rising out of the water, which is so horrifying.
Some of the action in that whole section on the island felt a bit hard for me to follow, with, like, the gym leader admin 3-on-3s in particular. There are some panels I was like, I'm not really sure what's going on. That bothered me a lot more than, just it being very continuous. It's like, okay, I've read long shonen battle arcs before. That wasn't too taxing for me, but yeah.
Yeah.
Fifi's comeback to Ruby is drawn so delightfully, it always makes me cry.
I meant to post that and be like, should we make this an emoji on one of the servers we're on?
Oh, yes.
I'll get to that right now.
I feel like anytime we talk about these mangas, I feel like I'm guilty of, like, ignoring, like, the Pokemon as characters. Because that's another thing Kusaka does very well, is that the fact that the Pokemon do have, like, these distinct arcs within themselves, and that's something that I find really compelling. But, so, like, seeing Fifi and... God, Ruby's naming convention is so wild, but, like, seeing the ways that Fifi, like, emerges after being rejected, only for them to be defeated, it's, like, it's very neat. I appreciate the ways that, like, so many of, like, the different Pokemon, like, my other big standout favorites, I love Rono. Aggron's already, like, a pretty cool Pokemon, but the fact that, like, Rono and Troppy, it's always neat to see the way that those Pokemon end up, like, bouncing off each other personality-wise.
Sapphire has a lot of very chunky Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to see. She's kind of like a defense specialist.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we might as well get into the characters.
Okay, fair enough. So to kind of start off with Ruby, his introductory chapter is excellent in establishing all his primary traits. His fabulousness, his obsession with looks, his disdain towards battling, his resourcefulness with the use of Ralph's psychic powers to lift up the truck, his conflict with his father, and his strong drive to take part in the contest, already an unlikely ambition for the protagonist of the series.
Mm-hmm.
I love that he's so vain that he has to fight his desperate need to be on camera to keep a low profile. So a bit of an internal conflict there.
Yeah, no, I really like the main kids. They're super cute and endearing, and, a completely different direction to the respective game characters if you count the two rival versions, and in the case of the anime, May. And I'm all for that. It's cool.
The hidden gender essentialism kind of recontextualized like his secret displays of strength for me. It wasn't like great for a second read through for me. I don't know, like when I first read it, I was like a teenager at the time. I didn't really read too much into it, so like the climax came to me as more of a surprise. Maybe I was just reading faster and less carefully.
Here's the thing, I can definitely agree that there are some weird vibes that come as a result of some of the stuff that they're doing with Ruby's arc. It seems like one of those things that, like, when this thing was being written in 2005, maybe they were thinking that, like, oh, we're doing something, like, different and progressive. We're, like, reversing the roles and stuff like that. But it feels like one of those things that is, like, one of those limitations that still comes on with being a shonen manga that is kind of being made for this, like, larger cross-media promotion thing, where it's one of those things that can hinder their ability to go further. It is absolutely stupid how, yeah, they do shaft, like, Sapphire in terms of, like, the end climax.
Yeah, it's often why I kind of find myself disagreeing with some progressive interpretations of, like, manga and anime, because a lot of the time what's being pointed out as, like, good representation is the start of a character arc.
Damn, I can't believe they straight-washed Wallace. Stephen X. Wallace fans be rioting.
That's true. Also, it's like Wallace and Steven are, like, right there, and, like, these are some primo beashies here, and, like, they're just deciding to make him like that. I mean, that feels, like, very emblematic of the fact that, like, when you play to, like, that shonen audience of teenage boys, there's that kind of fear of, like, we don't want to get them too riled up.
To offer a bit of a lukewarm defense for some of the Ruby stuff, speaking of Wallace, you do have someone who is very focused on being, like, you know, super beautiful and flashy as a mentor figure, and he remains an admirable mentor figure throughout. And it's like, it's not like Ruby ever loses his passion for beautiful things or for contests.
Oh no, he still keeps that as, like, a thing by the end of it. Even in the future arcs, we're going to see that he still kind of maintains that fashion-forward sense of himself, and the fact that his personal challenge is to try and beat all the Pokemon contest, I think, is interesting. And it's also interesting to see the idea of gender nonconformity being seen as a form of rebellion. It's interesting that, like, Norman is this very stereotypical masculine kind of figure who is, like, imposing, like, that kind of masculinity on Ruby, and in rejecting that and finding their own identity, like, they pursue things that are traditionally feminine, which, again, real gender essentialist kind of stuff going into that.
Yeah, we kind of have to take into account the whole context, right? Like, there's Sapphire being locked in a car, yada yada. There's, like, the fact that Ruby retains his outward personality throughout the manga, and his character arc and his willingness to fight comes through in different ways later. There's also the issue of how rebellion against parents, I guess, being disobedient and stuff, and, like, their authority has been framed up to this point.
Yeah.
I can't believe he has the same arc as my PTU character.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll say one other thing with Ruby. I find it very interesting the ways that Ruby's Pokemon do somewhat reflect some of the ways that they are in this very transient state. I say transient in the ways that they are, like, finding themselves transitioning from one identity to another, like, trying to, like, explore themselves. Because so much of what Ruby is about is performative. They are so focused on appearance and performance and the exterior. And that it's interesting that his Pokemon team is reflective of that, with, like, having cast form there. We could talk about Fifi. I don't know, do we want to talk about Fifi now, or?
Yes, I always want to talk about Fifi.
It's interesting to see a Pokemon team that is being more optimized for contest, and that being reflective of their mood set. So Ruby ends up taking, like, moves that would be considered suboptimal in, like, a battle setting. That is an interesting thing, but it is interesting to see the ways that, like, each of these Pokemon try to embody, like, the different types of Pokemon contest categories, and it feels very emblematic of the fact that, like, when they were putting in those features, you could almost hear the Game Freak devs being like, no, please, try the Pokemon contest feature. We put a lot of time into this. Please do this minigame. We promise, shithead teenage boys, it's not all, like, girly stuff. It's cool and tough and smart.
Guys, half of your audience are girls.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you think, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So, Sapphire I found like an excellent driven character. Like she drives a lot of the plot forward early on. It is really cool that the female Dex Holder here is the first one in the entire manga to have her journey follow the traditional game-like gym challenge. Like, no one else before her did that.
Yeah.
The leaders had a way different role in the past 3 parts of the manga. Despite being a wildling, like, she displays methodical scientific knowledge in her fights, like with her battle against Brawly. This hidden knowledge shows her upbringing as a daughter of a scholar. To parallel Ruby's hidden talent for combat, he takes after Norman.
We stand a dyslexic queen. If her Roxanne challenge is anything to go by.
It's a really nice touch that she didn't even know what a Pokemon Center was.
Oh my god, that's right. Which, you really have to wonder what is going on with Professor Birch here. Like, I mean, Norman rightfully gets a lot of crap as being a negligent, terrible parent, but, like, I don't know. Birch, buddy, your daughter is out in the wild. Is this like an anti-vax thing? Like, you should show her medicine, my man.
I don't know. He seems quite supportive of her. I think Birch is like one of the best parents in the series.
Yeah.
From what we've seen, I don't know, maybe there's some anti-vax stuff behind closed doors, but outwardly, I don't think we have anything to be concerned about. And I am often concerned about things, like Hovin can attest. Also, I just want to point out, holy shit, Sapphire is my PTU character.
Yeah. Birch, and by extension Sapphire, being more of a field researcher is a good way to make a fairly interchangeable Pokemon professor character from the games feel distinct in a way that matches the Hoenn region's more varied and tropical biomes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it absolutely makes sense that Sapphire is the way she is, given, like, the first instance where we meet Professor Birch in the game is, well, in the wild.
Yep.
He's definitely, like, got them granola vibes with, like, his sandals, his board shorts, like... This professor is ready to hang.
He's just nerd Kukui.
Oh my god. I can see the fix already. Those.
I love the idea of Kukui and Birch going on trips together, and Kukui just being super, like, confident and a bit of a daredevil, and Birch always be like, oh, maybe we should go back to the base now, please? Just hanging off the tree.
Yeah, and then he pins him down, and then I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
The Cubone Zone!
I want to talk about Wally. He's such a poor baby. I love him. He is my son.
Oh, yes. Wally is such an interesting character. Honestly, of, like, the characters in Ruby and Sapphire, Wally's always been kind of my favorite. I think there's something about how, like, it's interesting. They're a rival character, but they're kind of a non-traditional rival character in both the games and in this series, because Ruby and Sapphire kind of starts the criticism that people have where people talk about how, like, oh, the rivals stopped being jerks after this generation of games, and...
What do you mean? Barry always threatens us that he will, like, charge us 100 million PN or whatever.
Bumps into you.
Yeah, the fact that, like, in the games, Wally is also the sick kid. You take up kind of a mentor role, whereas in this game, we see Wally get to do way more than they do in the games, because when it comes to Wally in the games... One criticism that I kind of have is that outside of, like, having some battles with him, there really isn't a whole lot that they do. Like, they get their Ralts for the first battle, then they get a couple of other battles following that, and then you face them in Victory Road, and then after you beat them in Victory Road, they're kind of just standing there.
Yeah, it feels like we could have used a couple more rival encounters in Gen 3.
Yeah.
May's last one is pretty early in the game, or Brendan. I just say that because I always pick the boy, but, like, yeah, in both cases, I feel like, you know, an encounter or two more would have been nice.
To be honest, it's kind of a character progression for him to like, just stay in this cave, but because that means that his health is much better.
Hey!
That is true. They gotta get that resting cure. Any of y'all ever read The Beast in the Cave by H.P. Lovecraft?
Sorry, no.
They talk about people with consumption resting in caves because of the colder temperatures and stuff like that. That's kind of the vibe I got with him being in the caves.
I imagine in like a salt mine it would be cool.
Yeah.
I'm really glad they held off on bringing the other Dex Holders back.
Yes.
Since we already had such a huge ensemble to work with here, and it would have just overstuffed the arc to have legacy characters turn up.
Oh boy.
As I said in last episode's predictions, it's very in line with how the Gen 3 games felt like a fresh start relative to 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I love that Ruby, Sapphire, and Wally kind of all become sort of apprentices to gym leaders. Like Ruby becomes one to Wallace, Sapphire to Winona, and then Wally to Norman.
Yeah, which is interesting. One little thing that I was surprised that they kind of cut in the games, like, Wally ends up having just the most absurd luck on that route and manages to get a Ralt's first try. I'm not salty about that at all, but it's weird that they don't include Ralt's outside of Rara being borrowed. It's one of those things where, like I know you got to give Rara back so that, you know, like Ruby can use them in the like climax and all that, but it was one of those things where I kind of just wish that they kept like Rara the whole time.
Yeah, I thought they were building towards a no, this Pokemon's yours now sort of moment, but apparently not.
Yeah, it's yeah, justice for Wally, honestly, but I imagine I'm going to say that a lot more in the Emerald arc.
Oh no. I mean, I was thinking, oh no, when we get to Emerald, am I going to be just like, I really wish we'd have Wally as the main character?
Well,
Yeah. Wally's smiling face when he catches Kecleon, like he looks just like Shinji.
Aww.
yeah.
Although his parents would probably rather say, get back to bed, Wally.
Well, I'll say this. They did give Wally way more compared to the anime. Wally actually gets to do something. Wally makes 0 appearance in the Pokemon anime, so as someone who, like, the anime was their primary entry point into Pokemon, by the time I got to, like, playing Ruby and Sapphire and I saw this kid around, I'm like, who is this fool? Which, I promise not to go into do more anime comparisons, but it is strange that, like, Wally is a really interesting character as, like, someone who could act as a good point of view character. It's interesting that, like, they do not use them in something like the anime. And it's one of those interesting things that shows how, like, the manga ends up kind of going in its own direction with so many things.
Wally being skipped over a bit kind of works in the manga's favor a bit as we kind of get the Pacific Dialogue town kind of just covered by Wally as the climax starts, and then we have his training on Skypillar and like being the one to awaken Rayquaza.
The anime calls it Rayquaza. Also, he has his, like, asthma inhaler jacket, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he's going all Darth Vader on us, and I think that's a very sick outfit.
As Norman gives him his gauntlets, he's like, you are like the son I never had.
Yeah, oh, God, Norman. Can we talk about Norman?
We can talk about Norman.
Oh my God, Norman, what is this? I understand that they wanted to make him this kind of, like, stoic, kind of unlikable type of person in service of, like, development that we're going to be seeing, like, Ruby and Sapphire go through. But my goodness, if we're going to be talking, like, absolute bottom tier Father of the Year material, Norman ends up becoming as supportive of Wally as they are when you compare it to the ways that Ruby was treated. What are y'all's thoughts on Norman as a character?
I can't really hate him. I knew the redemption was coming, obviously, and the framing may be a little iffy on that always, but he was such an imposing figure throughout the manga. He was so effective as a threat and as like a mystery element to the story.
Yeah.
I really liked his involvement in that. The hyper-masculine gym leader dad is a perfect foil for the gender non-conforming protagonist. That was like already existing traits of the game exaggerated into something that really works well as a character arc. I love the fact that he keeps breaking his phone when hanging up. He's so intense, and his wife is like, oh yeah, he does that. He just does that.
Yep, no red flags there.
His refusal to let Wally have a Pokemon leading to Ruby rebelling against him even more is like an incredible establishing moment for the tension between them.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic bonding moment between Ruby and Wally, who are the real couple of the Ruby and Sapphire arc. Find me. The moment I saw, oh no, the lightning made you slip from my grasp, I knew that Viz was doing something with that.
Yeah.
I feel like in this world, I should just assume the best way to raise a kid is to fucking do attempted murder on them.
God. I mean, are you really a shonen protagonist parent if you're not either being non-existent, dead, or putting them into multiple instances of life-threatening growth?
I chuckled at Norman saying, well, he was a child, but he's 11 now. He can make his own decisions. Yeah, he's basically an adult.
Basically an adult. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat to Wensleydale. I thought he was effective in terms of, like, twisting the plot in interesting ways. I didn't really have much of a grounding on him as, like, a character as a result, but he worked fine for the story.
Yeah. When it comes to, like, some of the other gym leaders, too, I think he serves as a very good complement to, like, some of the other gym leaders of Hoenn. Because I'll say this is my game hot take. I think that, like, the Ruby Sapphire gym leaders are way less memorable than some of the other generations IMO.
Really?
Man, you're just coming for my fave over and over. Maybe I should gush a bit more.
I know, I know I am in a great minority when I say this. I should preface, like, when it comes to, I don't know, like, Roxanne, Brawley, Watson, they're all, like, interesting characters. Like, you know, Roxanne as, like, the school teacher, Brawley being, like, a surfer himbo, Watson as, like, kind of mad scientist. When you compare Tate and Liza...
What? I think that's a really interesting, like, gimmick. It's like they mirror each other, they repeat what they end each other's sentences. That's a really cool idea, like a double battle gym leader.
Yeah, no, I think that's neat.
I'm kind of in an opposite boat to you when it comes to Roxanne, but because I live for this reinterpretation of her. Like, in the games, I found her, like, a nice, helpful teacher, but she's like a vindictive, classist snob, the real stinker. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. So when you compare this to the games, they've made these gym leaders far more interesting than their game counterparts, because when you look at, like, Tate and Liza in the games, it's like, oh, space twins. But in here, like, the ways that their arc actually somewhat complements, like, some of the drama that's going on between, like, Ruby and Sapphire and...
I don't know. It's kind of like the whole manga doing that. What can you say about Erika, really? How memorable is she? Kusaka's talent really lies in that they bring out the more bland characters of the game to the limelight and give them interesting roles. So the games kind of factor in that. They are elements of flavor to be developed, and some things are tied together. I really like that Liza and Tate are related to, like, the two old...
keepers of Mount Pyre.
We have Brawley being definitely very good friends and roommates who have explored each other's bodies with Bruno. They're definitely an odd couple. One is a mysterious martial artist who has hidden away to train in the mountains to reach the pinnacle of his strength, while the other is a surfer dude.
Yeah. I mean, those are the two genders, you know, surfer dude and karate dude.
Sidebar, maybe Tate and Liza made more of an impression on me because they whooped my shit several times over as a kid. easily the gym leaders it took me the biggest number of tries to beat.
I kind of had the same with Watson. Watson is one of the gym leaders that I think got worse in the adaptation. In the game, I found him like a really interesting, fun character. He's quite charismatic. He has his signature laugh. He also has this, like, project on the side with New Marvel. This is something that he's been trying to develop. But here, like, the agency from the New Marvel project is taken away, and it's more like a discovery. And like, he's given these awful puns. He's Samson Oak.
Okay, can we talk a bit about the weird stuff they did with New Marvel?
I kind of dug it. I love that as just, like, a completely out of left field way to adapt just, like, a few rooms underground.
Just an entire robo generator.
It's a robo playground that can also act as an evacuation shelter. I live for that shit.
But the fact that it was built because they foresaw overpopulation in Marvel City, so let's just build a whole other like, what?
I mean, there's worse things a Malthusian could do.
That's true.
Is that the right term, Malthusian? Or am I thinking of Thermian?
Yeah, no, that is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't know. While I don't dislike the amusement park idea, it's just weird to me how it's so futuristic despite being an invention of the past.
Yeah.
Also, I would disagree on the game New Morville being boring. It's a way to recontextualize Watson's character in a completely new way. Up till now, we've thought of him as this jovial, carefree old bloke. But then with this, he kind of shows a bit of a serious side to him. He kind of seems responsible as a mayor. And that's the thing, New Morville is a failed project. I don't know, I always found it had a bit of depth, despite not being too gimmicky. Sometimes less is more in a location, I think.
I will say, like, the fact that they make, like, the Trick Master... Again, as you said, Wensleydale, Kusaka's talent is taking some of these minor one-note characters and, like, trying to flesh them out. And I am fascinated by the fact that Kusaka looked at, like, hey, let's take the character from the random generator room we made to, like, make it a robot. Like, this is an Asteroid Boy character that they just put in here.
Yes. No, I love all the NPCs getting the recurring roles. Gabby and Ty as well. They always stood out to me as NPCs in the game, particularly with how you always move around the region. Yeah. So having them be really involved in moving the conflict along and getting information to people was super cool.
Yeah.
They are this arc's bill, really.
Yeah.
There is finally no bill to say, the Pokemon transport system is down.
If we're going to talk about the gym leaders, honestly, my favorite of the gym leaders that they showed here was Flannery.
Yeah.
She was very true to her inexperienced game self. Like she kind of gave me the vibe of her introduction in the game. Like, I just inherited my gym from my granddad, and I want to follow in his footsteps.
Well, in this version, the fact that, like, her grandfather was a former member of the Elite Four, and having, like, that sort of, like, win streak being such a big thing is she serves as a really nice complement to the stuff going on with Sapphire. Like, they both, like, it's cool to see, like, these sort of brash, like, competitive gals being able to, like, face off against one another.
In a hot spring.
Yeah,
That was a choice.
A choice.
I like Winona's role as, like, the one who keeps the discipline among the gym leaders and who leads them in the end. It kind of gave me some weird vibes a bit when I realized maybe, like, the president of the Pokemon League taking away the command from her so she can participate in the battle itself. Maybe it was supposed to parallel, like, Sapphire getting disempowered in the climax, but I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
It's still just vibes.
Yeah.
I found her really great overall. We talked a bit about Wallace, but him being a contest coordinator has always made a lot of sense. I love how this potential is realized here, and he's so fabulous that he can end any conflict with just his beauty. He's the ultimate bard.
Gosh.
I guess to kind of include two characters, it's interesting that Norman and Stephen sacrifice themselves for others, in contrast to Archie and Maxie, who sacrifice others for themselves.
Like, one of the things that this arc does well is that so many of the different arcs play into one another. There's some really good storytelling there that I think they saw the stuff that was going to go on with the games, where they knew that the games were going to try and play into more of a difference between, like, the different version types, try to integrate that into the narrative, which I think is pretty cool. Though I will say it's low-key weird that, like, more of the Pokemon games didn't try to lean into this kind of, like, version differentiation like Ruby and Sapphire did.
One more note on Roxanne. It's nice that her role is kind of expanded by her having underlying ties to Professor Cosmo. It, like, parallels Tate and Lisa getting more important with the ties to the orbs. I also love that Wallace has Gary's car and cheerleader Sims.
Oh my god. That freaking car.
Wallace, he's our man.
Like, I will say that is one of those weird things that you do kind of see, I notice in Ruby and Sapphire. I feel like they do go into a weirdly futuristic direction that they kind of backpedal off of once we hit Gen 4, but Hoenn feels way more futuristic of a region compared to, like, the other Pokemon regions that we've seen in the games. Like, we got flying cars, we got the futuristic technology of these like running shoes, we got like the big high-speed boats, Sutopolis City being this weird bathysphere thing.
Which I guess it felt true to how my perception of the games was when I played it, because that was my introduction to the world. So just even incidental stuff like the Pokemon Center was like, wow, this is a really futuristic thing in the middle of this, seemingly quite, contemporary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess to go back to the New Moorville thing, I get why you'd find it a bit gimmicky, but it did kind of mirror my experience of what the Hoenn region is like, where you're just finding all of these crazy inner worlds to this region, and you just never know quite how vast it is.
Yeah, that's true.
Just to jump off of that, we talked a bit about Team Aqua and Magma earlier, for how much I dislike how Watson was handled in this arc. I do like his reason to want more land build because of the infrastructure problems in Moorville. Like, it's essential to not just making him a joke character, even if his role is reduced to what it could be. Do you want to talk about the teams?
Courtney finding elaborate ways to carry around hot sauce. She's just like me for real.
It's funny how Courtney is like, yes, child with 2 or 3 water-type Pokemon in your party pending cast form, why don't you join our extremely ground and fire-centric organization?
If competitive Pokemon has shown me anything, you gotta include a nice variety, a nice little spread of, like, the kind of Pokemon on your team. Otherwise, any old 10-year-old could just wipe the floor with you guys.
Yeah, at the very least, Swampert is ground type, so that makes more sense.
Yeah.
When it comes to the conflict between the gym leaders, Norman is too edgy to take a side. He's the Geralt centrist.
The enlightened centrist.
Oh my god. Yep, because that is definitely gonna not play out badly for you, Norman.
At first, I wasn't really sure about Archie and Maxie getting possessed by the orbs. It seemed like less interesting than having them continue to be schemers, but I feel like it led to some interesting developments with the orbs towards the end. So I had some problems, but I kind of dug it.
Yeah, the thing I really liked about the climax of Gen 3 in the games is just how big and, bombastic it felt. And it definitely felt like it matched that, the two of them with their fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Villain-ass expressions. And just Dragon Ball Z's lipping around.
Oh my god.
Look, okay, I understand a lot of the criticisms of both the game and the arc that we levied here. I don't disagree with a lot of them. But the thing is, when you have that happening, and then someone gets on top of a Rayquaza, and they start joining in the fight, my critical faculties just kind of slip out of the back of my head, and I just go, yeah! Fuck yeah! Or when Ruby and Sapphire don their emerald outfits when they finally go down to the cave, I'm like, heck yeah, that's cool, let's go! So, that was a lot of my experience of reading this arc.
No, they do definitely have a lot of fun with, some of the stuff. We joke about, this being a big old climax zone, just a massive, long set of climaxes, but it is a testament to the ways that one of the things that Pokemon Adventures does very well is, for lack of a better word, epicifies, so many of these different moments that we see in the game.
If there's any generation I'd be happy to have a slightly exhausting but just constantly full throttle overblown climax, it's this one.
It's interesting to hear your perspective, because I thought it was quite a bit better paced in the end there.
Oh, it definitely was.
The tail end of the series was much more cohesive and felt like one thing than, for example, the red, blue, and green arc.
Yeah, I think it helps that the motivations of Maxie and Archie, vague as they are at times, are a lot more cohesive than I want to revive my one dead Pokemon.
Courtney being revealed as a former contest coordinator is a nice touch, to have something for her and Ruby to bond over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she did so along with Daisy Oak, no less, apparently.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about some of the cameo? You mentioned that we don't see many of the Dex Holders, but we do see Red in a couple of cameos during Ruby and Sapphire.
Interesting.
Let me find the specific places where he makes his appearance.
The one I remember was in Sapphire's confession.
Yes.
But yeah.
It's mostly just Red being seen as this big imposing force, this aspirational figure. But I will say, even though I'm glad that they take all this time to try and give a fresh coat of paint to this and to try and, like, have a more fresh start. It is interesting to see, like, the kinds of characters that they do bring back and do make mention of. I am exceptionally curious on, like, what is it about the Pokemon fan club president that was like, we need this guy back.
Well, it's probably because the Pokemon fan club still appears in Ruby and Sapphire. It's still there in Slateboard.
That's true.
I did like the way that him and Ruby bonded over their, like, very specific views. And Pokemon fan club was just like, oh, finally, someone gets it.
Yeah.
We stand a hyperfixating king.
I really like the mentorship displayed in this arc overall. Like, Winona's scene of training Sapphire and giving her advice on how to actually approach flying Pokemon and position herself on the battlefield that was really cool.
Yeah. I don't know. Who would you guys say was your favorite character of the overall arc?
That's a tough choice. I think I would say either Wally or Sapphire. I don't know. All the three main characters are great to me.
Yeah, pretty much same.
We didn't really talk about Steven that much either.
Because Steven is boring! I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's a trust fund kid, but, you know, the fact that, like, he's our first on-screen death, and the fact that also he dies of exhaustion.
Yeah, it's a lot. I really like the detail that, like, when he's, like, commanding his Pokemon, he just does, like, a snap. It's very cool.
I think that's all my notes on the characters, really. So yeah, I want to talk a bit about the volume extras. They say that Team Magma is all about fire, but that's ground type erasure. They're just as much about ground as they are about fire. They hunt for Groudon, who is a pure ground type Pokemon. Plus they use all those Baltoys, Numels are also ground type. Besides, Team Flare will be the designated fire type team, so I want things to be perfectly balanced.
As all things should be.
If I were to kind of assign types to teams, Team Magma being ground, Team Aqua being water, Team Rocket being poison, Team Galactic has like most bug types, I think. Mostly the grunts have them. Team Plasma is like normal, I guess. Flare is fire. The Aether Foundation is capitalism.
No. They're the military-industrial complex, which is an extension of capitalism.
Ah, yes.
The volume comment about kaiju movies made me realize, holy shit, is Pokemon Emerald what laid the groundwork for me getting into Godzilla movies? Because, damn, it might well be.
Oh, yeah. It did give me the vibe of -1.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, that's the thing. Kaiju have always been a stand-in for larger forces and initially for nuclear Armageddon, but it makes sense because Kaiju have now stood in for ecological disasters with things like Pacific Rim as well as like the recent Godzilla movies. The Kaiju comparisons pretty interesting, and it is honestly something that, like, it's...
Yeah, it affect the climate and so on.
Also how the legendaries are these lumbering terrestrial creatures.
Yeah.
In the volume extras, Courtney and Tabitha's method of fighting seems to be, like, reversed when compared to how Courtney herself described it. She said that Tabitha relied on tricks, like sleep, while she preferred to be straightforward with her attacks. Well, it says like something completely opposite in the comments, which I've found really strange. From the volume extras, I've got Kusaka's comment on how everything is so easy to write with a PC nowadays. In inverted commas, it hits different when we live in the decade where rich people want to replace everything with AI. He really was like, oh no, my manga will lose its soul if I type it out on a Word document instead of in a notebook.
Oh, yeesh.
Yeah, gonna be some interesting commentaries with the Scarlet and Violet arc.
Shall we move to random observations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I love the Pokemon Association director making a comeback and being drawn in such a dramatic, epic way for such a funny design. I love how the blimp kind of mirrors his afro.
Fucking huge balloon.
All I could think of was the big Afro character from the Pokemon Coliseum games. I sometimes mourn the fact that those games didn't get as much tie-in with like the other kinds of Pokemon media, but I'll take this Afro boy as a compensation.
It was Mirror B, that's what the character's name was.
Yes.
There was also Crawford in Pokemon Ranger, Shadows of Almia.
Oh, God. Shadows of Almia. Shadows of Almia did get a manga.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they did do a comic of that. Oh, hey guys, stretch goal, baby.
Yeah.
Oh, well, patrons, if you donate enough, maybe as a bonus pod.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the Loose on Hyper with Zangoose and Seviper, 10 out of 10 chapter title, no notes. I like up to 11 with Loudred and Exploud as well. It's a nice Spinal Tap reference.
The swimmer returning. That's one of the characters that we got a cameo for.
Oh my god! What about that final reveal with the, like, red and blue gems? Because we got one more cameo from the Kanto region with Giovanni.
I mean, my thoughts on that are in the prediction corner at the end.
That's fair.
It was like tying this to the events of the Sevi Islands in Fire Red and Leaf Green in the games themselves, because there is a Ruby and Sapphire that Celio uses for the Pokemon transfer machine, or whatever it was called. I was curious if Picnica Kylie is an actual trainer in Winona's gym in the games.
No.
And she is.
Oh, what? What?
Yeah. But only in Ruby and Sapphire.
Oh!
I guess we have to assume she fucking dies before the events of Emerald because she mysteriously disappears and is replaced by someone else.
Oh my god! I was going off of my memories of Emerald with that. That's so weird!
Yeah, that's another kind of passing of the torch between Ruby and Sapphire to Emerald stuff of, like, Stephen bequeathing the champion's cloak onto Wallace.
Ooh.
Didn't mention that when I made the earlier comparisons.
Yep.
It amuses me that we really were one gen askew from getting a Dex holder named Silver Birch, because that's the name of a very specific type of tree.
Yeah.
Maybe if he marries Sapphire, sorry.
Yeah.
No, sorry, never mind. He's going to marry his sister.
Okay, so my last observation, this is kind of like an art kind of thing. So that tentacle that pulled Courtney into the Cave of Origins, that was supposed to be Rayquaza, right?
It was supposed to be Archie's tentacruel. It was shown later.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
Rayquaza's just like, I'm gonna deal with these two massive things. Oh, this person's kind of annoying. Fuck you. Go in there.
I think my last thing, observation-wise, is that, like, it is interesting that across, like, all these different kinds of media that it's weird how Ruby and Sapphire... Shipping is one of those things in the Pokemon universe that it's very rare for them to make a canonical ship happen. We rarely do see, like, actual relationships permanently form. Ruby and Sapphire is, like, one of the rare examples. The only other one I can think of is Kukui and, what's her name in Sun and Moon?
Burnets.
Thank you. It's somewhat rare to see. I don't have, like, much skin in the game when it comes to, like, them as a relationship. They receive enough development throughout the arc that it feels pretty substantial. What do you guys think of, like, their relationship?
I mean, I always shipped the boy trainer with May when I played the game, so I was pretty happy with it.
You weren't a Drew stan?
Drew?
It's an anime character, don't worry.
Oh, I have watched about, like, 2 episodes of the Hoenn anime.
From those couple of episodes, what were your impressions of the anime's version of May?
She was fine.
I didn't watch the anime at all, so I have no comparison. But from what I heard of Drew, he can be really compared to Brendan as a rival. I don't know, Brendan always struck me as very misogynistic when I played as the girl character.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is kind of wild. Like, Ruby and Drew kind of have similar-ish characterizations to one another, because Drew is all like, I'm going to be the best coordinator. I'm going to toss roses at people because that's my thing, I guess. Being all stoic and, like, all that kind of stuff. Drew is kind of, like, in a similar position where he acts all conceited, but it's heavily implied that there's like some kind of chemistry between her and May. But May's whole thing is that the only reason she starts her journey is because she's not actually interested in being a Pokemon trainer. She's more interested in just traveling the world and like all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like we don't see that much at all. And I don't know, like one other gimmick that they did a lot in the anime is that May would pretend to be a reporter and like hold out her fingers like she's like setting up a shot. I don't know. When I was growing up, I had a lot of annoyance towards May. I've softened on her a little bit as the years have gone on. But when you watch the anime and then going from that to this, it is a very stark difference.
It's very interesting to hear comparisons. Maybe like in the future, we should have a separate section to that, like comparisons with the anime.
Oh god. Well, if we're gonna do anime comparisons, one character that is left out and is an anime original is Harley. Their whole gimmick is they are the most flamboyantly gay character, which, if you've seen the Pokemon anime, that is saying something. Harley is just kind of known as being like the worst in Pokemon. Like, they're kind of just known for being like this weird, kind of duplicitous, trying to do whatever it takes to win. It's interesting that they didn't give... Ruby gets plenty of rivals in like the contest scene because of that. So I feel like that would have been something more interesting to see, like more characters competing in like the manga because of that.
Oh, speaking of the Pokemon, I think in terms of anime stuff, I did actually see most of the Gen 3 movies. And maybe another reason why, the new Morville stuff didn't strike me as too off base is that, like, oh yeah, in the Gen 3, like, Destiny Deoxys, they're just in this super futuristic city. So I guess I just internalized that as, like, yeah, Hoenn, futuristic. That's a thing.
Oh, one last thing. Gen 3 is also interesting because this is the generation where they get really into teaching people Braille.
Yes, I did really like that we have a blind character in reference to that, to all the Braille puzzles in the game. My god, this literal child, Tartaglia, was just left to drown while the family evacuated? That's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, they went to the Norman school of parenting there.
Oh my god. You have a job to do. You were paid for this. No, I wasn't. Wallace nicknaming his Pokemon after the Windsor family makes me want to chop his head off.
No one likes a monarchist.
No. I imagine that when Ruby got Celebi to retrieve the blue and red orb, he would say, "Go, Onion! You need to collect the orbs."
Onion. Well, you know, it's a good thing he went to Johto, because that's where they have all those eggs.
Delicious eggs.
Delicious eggs. Oh my god. Okay. Celebi does make an appearance, which...
I was going to talk about that in the Q&A section.
Yes, okay. Let's cue some A's.
Okay, let's just move to the Q&A section because Henry is going to explode.
Holy shit.
Okay, so we have a question from MP3 Help from Reddit.
Thank you for sending a question.
The ending of this arc got a flag for reversing the major character deaths. Do you think the series could have gotten away with having them all stay dead? And if so, how?
Considering the fact that they knew that Fire Red and Leaf Green were on the horizon, I think they had to have known that, like, oh, remakes are on the table. I can't imagine a way that they would have been able to, like, reverse elements of that when it comes to, like, character death. I mean, personally speaking, I feel like they could have just, like, with Norman, it would have felt, like, a lot more thematically cogent to, like, keep him dead and, like, that just be something that, like, Ruby carries with him, like, from there. I understand why they resurrect him, though.
Yeah, in the imaginary version of Oras that I keep thinking of now, maybe Sapphire would have become the new gym leader of Petalburg Town.
Yeah, with Steven having a much more prominent role as the champion and as someone who does make numerous appearances, I feel like that would have been a way harder thing to, like, pull. Although, side note, my little personal gripe with Steven, it's like, you know what would have been a way cooler thing? Like, I get people like him as the champion and all that stuff. Why could they have made Wally the surprise champion? I would have liked that so much more as a final Elite Four battle than him just being a consumptive living in the caves.
It's a running trend that they have going from here, where it's like the champion is someone who's helped you out along the adventure, kind of a mentorly figure along the way. They do it in the next gen with Cynthia as well. In terms of, like, the ending of this arc, I actually completely misread this question, and I said, how could the series have gotten away with bringing everyone back better? So that's how I've answered this. Sorry. I think the series could have gotten away with it better by setting Celebi up more.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the thing is, most of this arc has really good planting and payoff for so many different characters and plot threads, and, you know, as much as there's an abundance of plot conveniences, because there always is, with how this series works, this one sticks out because it doesn't feel like it's been built into well enough. Celebi wasn't really prominently highlighted in any of Ruby's flashbacks before this, so it does feel like okay, I guess, like, secretly this was a thing the whole time.
Yeah.
So if a powerful being resolves all the tension from the climax of a series by means of magic, and it's Celebi in a Pokeball, does it count as a literal god in the machine?
I would say yes, considering that Pokeballs are machines, and I don't know if we can consider Celebi a god, though.
It is a legendary... what's with legendary time travel beings and kids named Ruby, honestly? God, I wish that the ending actually did stick to some deaths. Like, the manga has so many characters that it actually hit better if Celebi didn't reverse anything. But I do like Norman and Courtney surviving, since it's, like, more interesting for them to find peace and, like, atone by living the life. I feel like they still have some interesting stuff to bring into the story later. I don't feel the same way for Steven, though. I thought he was, in the manga itself, little more than a plot device, and his death could be great for, actually, Wallace's character arc, as he, like, would properly inherit the mantle of the champion.
Yeah, he could have been like an Ace type figure from One Piece.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. Considering the fact that Celebi was seen as this big figure that they were putting so much effort into summoning in the Gold and Silver arc, the fact that Ruby just happened to, like, have it on him, and just when thinking about all of the different situations that, like, Celebi could have helped out in, I think if they more clearly communicated that, there would have been, like, clear stakes of, like, using it. Time travel and stuff always comes with, like, a degree of consequences and stuff like that. So it's something where it's, like, it's something that could have had, like, a degree of consequences that they would build up, which could have, like, made it more understandable why Ruby was keeping this a secret up until then. Like, have an interaction where, like, Sapphire would be like, oh, what's this Pokeball you have here? It's like, nope, nothing, it's secret.
I think it would have worked well if, for example, like, one element of the story that happened, like, would seemingly be reversed early on in the story. We would have, like, a bit of mysterious setup for it, but it wouldn't be, like, exactly clear that because, like, just showing him doing something with a Pokeball, it's kind of obvious already. Doing that would be a bit subtler, I guess. Anyway, another question, maybe?
Yeah, also from MP3 Help, Hoenn gym leaders got a lot of focus in this arc. Which gym leader is your favourite, and what is your favourite moment of theirs? I guess on my part, I gotta rep Flamery, my OG Poke waifu.
Of course.
I was gonna answer similarly, but for different reasons, but you do you.
I like the way that she ended up mobilising all the other gym leaders to deal with the threat.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool, like, especially after it's directly influenced her own homeland that she has a very personal connection to. It was a cool moment.
Yeah, she has this, like, it's a thing where her arc acts as a good microcosm for a lot of the conflicts that we see throughout the series. She's one that deals directly with a lot of the ecological themes, but there's also that theme of legacy, which is a pretty common thing that we see in Pokemon, just by the merit of it being this sort of multi-generational story, wanting to, like, meet, like, the aspirations and goals that people have set for you. I think her presence makes her an easy favorite for me as well.
Yeah, I've got to say, objectively speaking, probably Norman or Wallace would win out because they are the best developed. But if we're approaching this as a game adaptation, I've got to go for Roxanne. She's a relatively boring character in the game, and here she was made so much more distinct in terms of her role and personality. And
Roxanne.
yeah, I've mentioned that Watson was probably my favorite gym leader in the game. I've already mentioned I've quite been disappointed by him being portrayed as quite weak as well.
Just an overall less dynamic character.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not very fitting since he has the Dynamo badge. And he's the only gym leader to completely thrash my team in Pokemon Emerald, so something is not right.
Yeah.
There's one more to read out from that user. If you want to do it, Henry?
Yeah. Is there a Pokemon, NPC, area, or game mechanic from Gen 3 that you wish got more of a spotlight in this arc, and why?
Well, unfurls very long list.
Which, there's so many mechanics.
Well, if you've got a long list, then we'll probably cover each other quite a bit. So I'll start because I have got only a few. So I wish we saw more from Route 111. It was like the first desert area in Pokemon, and I feel like we completely gloss over it. It was quite a disappointment.
Yep.
I wish we saw more of Moss Deep City, more of the Space Center, the Shell Cave, the museum in Lily Cove, and the weather station. Just very interesting locations, but better used.
Yeah.
Probably necessary to cut them out for the pace of the story, but still a shame.
Yeah, for me, like, the big ones are Route 118 to 119. Just kind of the whole stretch from Moorville to Lily Cove, those routes in between with Fortree in the middle. Because that's kind of my biggest disappointment in this arc as a game adaptation, is that even though it takes a lot more time than the prior games to establish location, it doesn't quite capture that sheer grandeur, scope and variety of the routes, or at least how grand they felt to me as a child. I remember how much the world felt like it opened up once you crossed that little stretch of water into this dense forest with tall grass and crazy weather. It just felt mind-blowing to me, especially because I couldn't work out where to go as easily as I would now, so
yeah,
this route completely took me off guard. And in a way, like you said, yeah, it's something they can't really portray with the nature of how Kusaka likes to structure these arcs. So it's kind of by necessity. There's so much ground and so many characters to cover that beelining to the big set pieces is perhaps the only feasible way to cover this with the time frame given. And, you know, it nails most of the appeal of the game, so it's not too much of a complaint.
I'm trying to think. I'll be honest, there weren't a whole lot of, like, mechanics that I feel like...
Oh, Henry's like, I fucking hate Hoenn, so I wish they portrayed even less of it.
No. Well, to me, it's like, when I think about, like, some of the mechanics, because the biggest mechanics that stuck out to me growing up with, like, Hoenn was the Pokemon contest, secret bases, and, like, the different teams. And that, when I think back on Hoenn, those are, like, the main things that stick out. And those are all, I think I'm just lucky in the fact that those are the main kinds of things that I think this arc translated pretty well. Although with, like, the secret bases, like, I'm honestly impressed that they showed the secret bases as a thing as much as they are, because that is such a side mechanic that, like, it could be such a time sink for those playing it. And that was, like, honestly, when I was growing up, that was, like, the thing about Ruby and Sapphire that intrigued me the most, is, like, making secret bases and decorating stuff, because... But, like, honestly, it's impressive that, like, they were able to include that in the story and include it for, like, vital reasons, too.
Wensleydale did actually cover a fair amount of mine, but, like, Hex Maniac, because she's a goth icon. But, you know, maybe a future arc will include her.
When she becomes waifuified.
Yeah, maybe X and Y, when he can be like, Mummy Milkers, something.
Henry's not having a good time.
You Wensleydale use Psychic Blast. It's super effective.
I'm sorry, you're the one getting me demonetized by constantly talking about the climax zone.
That's on me.
The Cubone zone. The other thing on the list is that could have been cool was different bikes.
Yeah.
You could have some Mac versus Acro action. You could have given Ruby and Sapphire each a different one. Additional question, which one would you give each of them?
Mach Bike parallels, like, Ruby's thing, because they're, like, all speedy and stuff like that. Acrobike, I could imagine Sapphire doing some sick stunts with that one.
Yeah, she jumps across like branches and stuff with it or something.
It does feel like it fits her being Tarzan, but also acrobike is like really show-offy, right? You can do like a different sort of stunts on it, kind of like you can do in Pokemon contests, so maybe the other way around works as well.
Yes, and then maybe like Sapphire picked the muck bike because she's just like, I don't really care about this whole bike thing. I mainly want to swing on vines, so I'll pick the fast one, I guess. So yeah, it works either way. From SOW Montaru on Twitter, was the blue one really better than the green one?
Oh?
I'm really curious, what do they mean?
I think... Are you referring to the outfits?
Is it like me just not understanding VTubers? What is going on?
So, okay, my answer to this is, in terms of starter, no, Trico Gang. Legendary, no, Rayquaza Gang. Bit of the Hoenn map, no, Jungle Gang. So overall, no, Blue and Hoenn is pretty mid.
I feel the same.
Was the blue one really better than the green one? I'm trying to think, is perhaps like the outfits that the two were wearing? Is it about...
But they were wearing a red outfit before.
Oh, I think I might know what they mean. So, it might be about Trico and Mudkip, because at the start, when, like, Ruby was battling against Sapphire's Torchic, there were 2 Pokeballs in the bag, and like, Birch told him to pick the blue one, because this will be super effective against fire.
Okay, well, I guess I answered the question then.
Oh... Yep. At the risk of evoking terrible memes, I do like Mudkips, so...
I picked Mudkip on my first go. I have a soft spot. No complaints there.
Water Ground is like a pretty nice type coverage. It's wild that Sceptile does not get a secondary type.
No.
Right?
No.
That's so weird.
Gets a Mega Evolution that is Dragon type, which is very cool.
Yeah. It's weird that they gave, like, firefighting to Blaziken, water ground to, like, Swampert, and it's like, I don't know why they left Sceptile out of the mix. Like, if they're trying to think of, like, oh, we don't want to make another grass poison type. My little hot take, Sceptile could work as a grass flying type.
I could see it with Grovyle, with Sceptile not really.
Yeah, with Grovyle, because they're, like, all glidey and stuff, but yeah.
Okay, shall we round off?
Yes, let's do that.
Yes.
So that is going to do it for the 4th episode of Podcastmon Adventures. You can listen to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. linktr.ee/Wensleydale Cheddar is where all the links are. Patreon.com/Wensleydale Cheddar is what helps us pay the bills. So if you want us to devote more time to making the show better, consider supporting us there. In return, you can get your name in the YouTube credits or get access to some bonus content. For example, the complete Nuzlocke of Pokemon Soul Silver with Spinning Asha. It's a lot of fun, and I mean a lot. It's 120 episodes that you can access for just $1 a month, plus becoming a backer can help me reach more ambitious goals, like making a special episode about the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime, or a video about Poland as a hypothetical Pokemon region.
Ooh.
Remember that much like the seafloor cavern, the YouTube algorithm is a dark abyss of sorrows and woes from which channels like these never resurface, and what helps us navigate it is liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast with a friend. On my YouTube channel, you can also get access to my manga video essays and Dogface Diaries, a retrospective podcast where Hoven and I cover the cult sci-fi manga World Trigger volume by volume.
Woo!
Henry, where can people find you?
You can find me in plenty of places online, mostly under the name of Henry Kathman. I'm a very easy person to Google. YouTube.com/Henry Kathman. When we are recording this, I am releasing a episode about Adventure Time and themes of eternal recurrence, and someone, not going to name names, you might hear a familiar voice if you listen to this podcast, if you watch that video.
I'm really looking forward to it for whatever reason.
In addition to that, pretty much all my stuff is supported via the Patreon, patreon.com/Henry Kathman. And going into January, I'm going to be trying out a concept that I've been workshopping throughout the year. Going into 2024, junk drawer essays, little special micro essays that people could potentially request if you support me on Patreon. So, if you're interested in hearing me give thoughts on a topic of your pick, consider supporting me there. Those are the main places to go. You can find the other links all around there.
All right. And Hoven, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Hoven with an H, and also Blue Sky at Hoven with an H. If you enjoyed Henry's revulsion at waifu culture in the Pokemon fandom, you might want to check out my podcast, Hoven's Hideaway, on the ending to the harem romance manga We Never Learn, in which we criticize it a lot. That might be fun.
Fun times.
If you like me talking about the kaiju comparisons, you can check out my episode on Kaiju number 8, where we dissect the initial chapters of that, which is going to be a big hit, maybe, soon. It's got an anime coming out April this year. It looks like they're gunning for it to be a big thing.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, Diet World Trigger. Let's go.
Diet World Trigger. I'm not gonna lie, I stopped reading Kaiju 8 a while ago. It got a bit boring for me, but maybe I'll pick it up again.
I haven't yet started, so I might start.
Maybe it's better if you binge it all in one go. I liked the first few volumes.
If you're lost with all those links, go ahead and check out my Linktree. Once again, you can find all the links mentioned here at linktr.ee/Wensleydale Cheddar. Send us emails, questions, comments, suggestions at wensleydale013@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter at Podcastmon Manga, or individual Twitters at Wensley Cheddar, at Hoven with an H, and at Catherine Henry. As Hoven mentioned, we're also on Blue Sky now. Find our profiles on my Linktree.
Yeah.
A sincere thank you to Nick Rosaline Olekshak, whose wonderful music you could hear throughout the show. I am absurdly proud to have gotten his permission to use his predictive covers of Hoenn music that he composed for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire before it even came out. And let me tell you, 9 years ago, I would listen to this playlist religiously. There are so many covers that I've been wanting to use for this episode, but there just wasn't enough space, so I encourage you wholeheartedly to check out his channel on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Bandcamp. You can find all of those links at the very bottom of my Linktree.
Yeah.
Hoven, what are we covering next time?
Next time, we're covering the Fire Red and Leaf Green arc, which, better get some predictions going for what I think. I've not read it before. I don't know what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, obviously, we've overshot a bit. I don't think it's going to be that long. We're already past the release of both Fire Red and Leaf Green and Emerald. But at the same time, I've always undershot, so I don't want to go too big. So my prediction for length is that it'll be 4 volumes, totaling 47 chapters.
Oh, okay.
So how accurate was I there?
Not too far off. It is shorter. It is only 35 chapters long.
Okay, I was only 12 off. And then, yeah.
Do you have any predictions in terms of, what the main conflict?
What's going to happen? So plot-wise, I think it'll involve the Dex Holders for the Kanto arcs, as well as maybe some bit players from the Johto lot in Adventures on the Sevi Islands. It'll touch more on the red, misty, yellow love triangle. Maybe, okay, I don't know about Azurill, but Barboach will feature prominently, since it's a newly unevolved version of a prior gen Pokemon that hasn't been showcased as much in the Choir arc. Plot-wise, I think it'll involve Latios and Latias.
Wait, I'm sorry, is Barboach like this?
I checked the national decks. I think it was introduced in Gen 3.
Yeah, but Whiscash was as well.
Was Whiscash not Gen 2?
No.
Fuck, never mind. Okay, Barboach won't be there. Barboach will never be there. Oops. Plot-wise, I think it'll involve Latios and Latias.
Okay.
Yeah, since they're legendaries we've not seen featured yet. And they match the colour scheme of the orbs turned gemstones that Giovanni picked up.
Yeah?
It will be really funny if Latias mirrored her plot from the movie Pokemon Heroes and masqueraded as a girl trying to get with Red just to add to the harem hijinks. And then Jirachi and Deoxys are also possibilities, but I feel like they're getting saved for the Emerald arc, particularly Deoxys, since we've already had space highlighted in Ruby and Sapphire with the Meteorite, and the volume extras highlighting Pokemon from space like Lunatoni and Sol Rock. And then you have Rayquaza's domain being between sky and space, as they say it. At the same time, they could go the long game and have Deoxys play a role in Allras to recreate the Delta episode, but I doubt they'd have the foresight that far. It'll probably feature in both. So yeah, those are my predictions going forward.
Okay.
All right. How accurate do you think this was, Henry?
Oh, I'm going to keep my lips sealed because I'm just gonna anticipate Hoven's reaction to seeing the ending of this, because fans of the Pokemon Adventures manga do know Like, this arc has a bit of a reputation as being like a bit of a shakeup in more ways than one. So, I think you'll find that some of it was accurate.
Okay.
I would like to stay for the record that it's a good arc. I like Hoenn fine enough. It has just enough water. I don't want to be painted as a Hoenn hater here.
It's too late, Henry. It's too late.
That it is. Just as my little PSA, look up clips of Harley from Pokemon anime. A non-zero number of them involve him cross-dressing. So, I'm just saying, this is what we could have had in this manga.
I've just noticed, Hoven, we haven't had a musical number.
Yeah, what was your bet for what I was going to do? I don't have one.
Well, it has to have trumpet, so...
Okay, so one was you were going to do something with Ruby, 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 or that you were going to actually parody the Goblin song from the recent Doctor Who episode.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, with the former, that's your frame of reference for that word. Mine would be the song Ruby by the Kaiser Chiefs. They go, Ruby, 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 ah! Because that was on the radio all the time when I was, 10, so...
Right. Okay. Me and not knowing music. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm in the same boat as you, Wensleydale, so don't even apologize.
It fills my heart with great joy that we have not knowing music to bond over. That means that in the end, we will all podcast together.
Yeah!
In the Cubone zone!
No! So, this was our 4th episode, and as always, it looks like Podcastmon Adventures is blasting off again!
Into the climax zone!
Deoxys, what are you doing here?
Chemical joke.